Let's continue our study in the wonderful Gospel of John. We're getting near the end of the Gospel. This is chapter 21, verses 20, 21, and 22. No comparisons. After hearing that he will die by crucifixion, Peter asks how it will go for John, but the Lord tells him to just focus on following him. Chapter 21, verse 20. Now turning, Peter sees the disciple that Jesus loved following, who also pressed in the meal upon his chest and said, "Lord, who is your betrayer?" Now notice the word following in this verse, but also in the previous verse, he says to him, "Follow me." Well, and then he commands Peter to follow him, and then there's John following. It's very possible that this use of the word follow in one verse and then right away in this verse, it's just a coincidence. It's just a coincidence. It's also possible that there was a subtle message that Peter had to be commanded to follow the Lord Jesus. Of course, follow here has this metaphorical sense of obeying him, being like him. But John followed without being commanded. And of course, in that verse, John was just physically following. So is it just a coincidence, or was there a subtle message about Peter needing to be commanded and John just doing this, following Jesus? It's hard to say. Even though he was probably reluctant, John had to talk about himself because he was involved in this incident. Beyond that, this mention of the disciple that Jesus loved prepares the reader for verse 24, in which he clarifies that he, the author, is the disciple that Jesus loved. We read variants of this expression, the disciple whom Jesus loved, in 13:23 and 19:26 and 22 and 21:7. The expression, the disciple whom Jesus loved, appears with variations 5 times. Chapter 21, verse 21. Peter, having seen that one, says to Jesus, "But Lord, what about him?" Several incidents in the Gospels indicate that Peter and John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, were close friends. Only once, near the cross of the Lord Jesus, when the mother of the Lord Jesus was entrusted to the care of the disciple that Jesus loved, we are not told that Peter was there. Maybe he was there, but it isn't mentioned. But we know that Peter and John were close. With that in mind, Peter's question is easier to understand. Peter wanted to compare his situation with that of his friend. In the next verse, the reader will learn what the Lord thinks of that kind of curiosity. Chapter 21, verse 22. Jesus says to him, "If I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You, follow me." The Lord Jesus' response to Peter's question was a stern rebuke. If I want him to remain until I come, that makes an extreme contrast. How extreme is this contrast between "if I want him to remain until I come" and "Peter, when you get old, you're going to be crucified"? How extreme is this contrast? Well, documents outside the New Testament suggest that Peter died in about AD 64, and it's fairly certain that John wrote the book of Revelation in about AD 95. If those dates are correct, then John lived about 30 years beyond the year of Peter's death. Well, even though John certainly did not live until the Lord's return, he did live for a long time after Peter was martyred. This prophecy about how he will die was probably very challenging for Peter. It is as if the Lord said, "Even if I arrange it so that John never dies at all, will you follow me, or will you become envious?" There's an important application in this verse for us. Our lives are governed by God, and we should not compare our circumstances with the circumstances of any of our friends who might seem to be doing better than we are. One of our friends gets a good job, but we have to start from the bottom. One of our friends has great health, and we struggle with ongoing illnesses. One of our friends inherits $1 million from an uncle, but we hardly have enough to survive. In all these situations, is the Lord Jesus unfair? He might be unfair as the world counts fairness, but he is just and righteous and good. All of those situations become tests in our lives. Will we become envious, or will we follow the Lord Jesus? He says, what is that to you? Don't worry about what Jesus does with his other servants. Just do what's right. Follow him. When we cry out, Lord, why do I have to suffer? Lord, why me? This is the answer. And sometimes this is all the answer he ever offers us. Do you want to follow him or not? It's a question of faith. Are you walking in faith? Are you believing in him so that you can experience life and experience it abundantly? Of course, sometimes people that are in the middle of difficulties, suffering, don't want to be told this. Let's tell ourselves and our people this ahead of time. Let's all be prepared. What is that to you? You follow me. The Lord Jesus has a personalized walk in mind for every individual, a specific life of experiences and growth for each particular individual. He puts this in such radical terms here. Peter, if you die a martyr, but John, since you bring him up, well, if I want him to never die, what is that to you? Follow me. The Lord Jesus is asserting his right to do whatever he wants with us, his followers, his servants. So this lesson, which urges us to avoid comparisons and envy, is placed prominently right here, almost the very end of the Gospel of John. Surely this lesson could have been inserted in a variety of other places, but here it is at the very end, almost the very end of this Gospel. This does suggest that it is a very important lesson which we should all take to heart. Perhaps referring to this very passage, some interpreters have argued that John's Gospel was a pro-John and an anti-Peter statement in the political setting of the early church. But honestly, this view seems presumptive or even cynical. It's better for us to accept these statements about Peter and John's relationship with the Lord Jesus as historical truths. It was the real situation, and also as spiritual lessons for us. Followers of the Lord Jesus ought never to envy the situation of another. Feelings of envy, as well as the habit of comparing our situation with that of others, are completely outside the will of God. So as a summary, simply, after hearing that he will die by crucifixion, Peter asks how it will go for his friend John, but the Lord tells him to just focus on following him.